Hey, yo, Tim, drop that beat for me. Yeah. Doing some real sexy for me.
It would be foolish to understate Zhang Yimou's impact on not only the foundations of my taste, but world cinemas at large. His prestigious filmography includes masterpieces like Raise the Red Lantern, To Live, and Judo, which typically rank among not only the greatest films from mainland China, but often the greatest films of all time, with Raise the Red Lantern at a comfy 180 on the Letterboxd Top 250. He, as well as several other members of the self-titled fifth generation of filmmakers, a group made up of working-class men whose adolescence was dominated by memories of the Cultural Revolution, upon graduating from the Beijing Film Academy decided to flip the concept of narrative film on its head. Directors alongside Yimou, like Chen Kaigi and Chen Zhuangshuang, mixed a free-spirited and symbolic approach to disseminate their deconstructions of contemporary politics in an engaging way for mainstream audiences. The versatility and evolution of Yimou's style is by far the most fascinating and appealing aspect of his filmography. While Yimou's dramatic films are heightened by his heart-stopping sense of poetic melodrama and romanticism, his shift into revitalist wuxia films are effused with pop spiritualism, which repurposed and fictionalized accounts of real historical events. Hero, his first big-budget action film, demonstrated a populist shift in his style, establishing his trademark visual-oriented bombastic theatricality and no-nonsense plotting. He would continue afterwards to make 5 more action films, each of different and often diminishing critical appraisal, but Hero to this day remains one of the finest and most important action films of the 21st century. And for all the praise that Hero and Yimou's earlier films received, there are a couple points of critical contention brought against him. For his action films, several critics, specifically Chinese ones, felt like his anachronistic references to Japanese cinema robbed the films of their cultural heritage, a point I don't really feel at liberty to argue with.
Zhang's understanding of Chinese art is very contemporary. Many elements that feel Chinese in his films are either recent inventions or taken from other cultures. That one-shot kill move in Hero is much more Japanese than it is Chinese. Over the years, Zhang Yimou garnered a lot of criticism for watering down Chinese culture. I'll admit, I was one of those critics. Traditional Chinese culture suffered greatly in the past 100 years. I was afraid the thing I loved would change, get turned into a knockoff of Japanese culture. But Zhang continues to do it, and do it with such commitment and confidence, he owns it.
However, the second and more pressing issue is that Yimou's politics got more or less revolutionary with age. While this may be true for some of his more sentimental 2010s output, I don't feel like this specifically applies to Hero. This point is actually why I wanted to make this essay, to defend the ending of one of my favorite films. It's understandable to interpret the finale of Hero as what Stephen Hunter of the Washington Post described as confronting what must be called the tyrant's creed and declaring itself in agreement with the tyrant. The borderline nationalistic interpretation of Qian Xia certainly doesn't offer any favors. For those who need a catching up of Hero's Rashomon-esque narrative, it's about a literal nameless warrior, based on the real-life Jing Ke, as he's tasked with assassinating the soon-to-be first emperor of China. To gain his trust, he tells a series of elaborate cons to hide the fact that he is fighting alongside fellow heroes Broken Sword and Flying Snow. He's eventually found out, but due to his moral convictions, decides to abandon the cause and die a martyr at the hands of King Zheng. Each narrative weaves treachery, a sweeping broad sense of romanticism, and is handsomely adorned with a different color palette, ranging from gray, to red, to blue, to green, and even white. The action feels larger than life, thanks to a strong sense of scale and imagination. However, underneath all the glamour hides a much more difficult to parse set of ideas and themes, some of which are the subject of aforementioned criticism, which I wrote this essay in an attempt to defend. With regards to the themes, this film does get quite slippery when attempting to talk about them. In interviews, Yimou is very coy and elusive with answering these films' explicit ideas, instead focusing on his process of image construction. For the risk of sounding presumptuous, I do very much believe Yimou had an idea when making this film, to establish in his mind what a true hero is. Over the course of the film, Yimou defines and redefines what it means to truly be a Zhonghu. Each of the main characters in this film act as an allegorical figurehead for the ideals they represent, Nameless being reactionarianism, Broken Sword being pacifism, Flying Snow being revolutionarianism, and the Emperor being legalism. Each ideology is inspected throughout the film, although the film's overall ambiguity leads to each of them receiving equal amounts of legitimacy. Yimou is not here to argue which one functions the best, rather display how a hero wields their ideology in conflict. In the opening courtyard fight, we see a stereotypical sense of heroism, a brave warrior standing up to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It's a simple and correct definition. We see this idea reinforced during the invasion of Han, later in the film. However, it's merely a portion of the full tapestry. Broken Sword's character arc sees him coming to terms with the inherent violence of revolution. He instead wishes to live an imagined utopia in which swordsmen become philosophers. His heroism is therefore a reckoning with fighting until you no longer have to. We also see Nameless's sense of heroism shift from pure reactionary retributive justice to adopting Flying Snow's more valiant sense of the greater good. The greater good here being established as personal sacrifice at the expense of others. Fighting is not merely enough, winning is the goal. And how does Nameless win his conflict? Through martyrdom, of course. Martyrdom is also a recurring motif in this film. However, it too falls short of the core idea. In the red plotline, Nameless heads to the kingdom of Han to kill the alleged ex-lovers Flying Snow and Broken Sword, which we find out later cannot be farther from the truth. While he's there, he requests Broken Sword to write the Chinese character for sword in red ink.
求和字，
剑
几尺
8尺，
，8尺见字，需要朱砂。
His initial lie is to examine his swordsmanship so he could best him in combat, and the scroll is brought into the throne room, incorporated into the mise-en-scène, an ever-present symbol hovering in the back of most master-wides of the final half. Its prominence could not be more clear. During one of the film's last conversations between the future king and Nameless, the king has an epiphany about the character's significance.
寡人悟到了，参见的这幅字根本就不含剑法招式，写的是剑法的最高境界。剑法，其第一层境界，讲求人剑合一，剑就是人，人就是剑，手中寸草也是利器。其第二层境界，讲求手中无剑，剑在心中，虽赤手空拳，却能以剑气杀敌于100步之外。而剑法的最高境界，则是手中无剑，心中也无剑，是以大胸怀包容一切，那便是不杀，便是和平。
He takes note about how the artistry of the calligraphy displays an ideological basis rather than a physical one. The sword is not merely a weapon, but rather a metaphysical ideologue, a philosophy that renders your core as impenetrable. A sword can kill from 100 paces if it reaches the mind before any violence occurs. And it's in this realization where Yimou's true thesis is derived from. During the endgame, the most heart-wrenching sequence plays out, an ultimatum inside a lover's quarrel. Broken Sword proves that his belief is divine and is defeated when he lays down his weapon for Flying Snow, dying as a martyr for his belief. It's certainly not the first nor the last Shakespearean moment in Yimou's filmography, but it's definitely the strongest. It's in this moment of tragedy that Yimou directly posits what is heroic, knowing when to use your sword and when not to. Nameless and Broken Sword's desire for a world united does not come from a tyrant's perspective, but rather a humanistic one, a romanticized and maybe even naive lust for a world entirely without conflict. The oncoming consolidation of the Seven Kingdoms into China is an inevitability, therefore, not a bending of the will or a compromise. All our heroes can hope for is a peaceful conclusion. The Emperor's final decision, too, is now recontextualized as a senseless act of showmanship. He doesn't have to kill Nameless, he no longer poses a threat, but since he is a fascistic brute, and since he is unheroic, he decides to kill him as an example. A lot of Yimou's typically tragic endings can easily be misread as the film's agreeing with the brutality. His equally subversive and tragic finale of House of Flying Daggers is also one I definitely want to discuss another time. However, I strongly believe these endings are merely showcases of loss, not endorsement of the violence. While the ending walls of text added in post-production, and its ties to real historical events, potentially mutter the interpretation waters, I think its self-conscious reticence and thoughtful image construction keep it from submitting to cheap authoritarian ploys. Yimou might eventually become a figurehead for the Chinese status quo with his nationalistic Olympic ceremonies, but I think his mind and heart are still far from it.